Hello and welcome to this video. This video is going to be called SPASTICUS AUTISTICUS, the genius of Ian Dury. Ian Dury in a way represents the most British of music artists, able to straddle American popular music influences, American rhythm and blues, rock and roll influences, but also meld them together with sort of British music hall, British comedy influences. He really was an incredible songwriter and performer. I first came across him right at the beginning of my musical journey. In 1979, he brought this incredible track out that became a huge hit here in the UK called Hit Me With Your Rhythm Stick. I absolutely love this tune. There was a number of tunes that emerged in 1979 that made me absolutely fall in love with music. They were Ring My Bell by Amy Stewart, Pop Music by M, and Hit Me With Your Rhythm Stick by Ian Dury. Now, if you're expecting a video where I go through his biography and the albums and I rank them and I say, the biographical details or go through my favourite tracks, I'm not going to be doing that on this video. Ian Dury was such a seminal influence on me right early on that he's actually embedded quite deep in my musical system. And so this is going to be quite a personal take on Ian Dury, but I will start by covering a little bit of biographical information. He was born in 1942. His dad, I believe, was a chauffeur and was away from home quite a bit. And I think by the time he was 7 years old, he'd gone, and he got brought up by his mom and her sister, I believe. When he was quite young, he contracted polio. This would have been in 1949 because there was a polio epidemic here in the UK. He believed he caught it from a swimming pool in Southend. He would have been 7 years old. He was placed in hospital, and by the time he'd recovered from the polio, he was crippled on one side of his body. Ian Dury's disability became not only almost like part of his muse, part of his raison d'etre as an artist, but it also seemed to impede him in no way whatsoever. Ian Dury was disabled, but although quite a slight man, his personality was huge. And as his son Baxter Dury once said, he came at people like a Polaris missile. This guy was like a bomb going off. He seems to have come from a sort of southern London-esque upbringing, although he lived for a short time in Switzerland, he lived for a short time in Cornwall, but he seemed to have with him that sort of Cockney music hall, British comedy, almost carry-on sensibility about him. But at the same time, he was a Renaissance man. He loved music, he wrote songs, but he was also an actor. He was also an artist and actually went to art college and befriended the great British painter Peter Blake, who designed the cover of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. So this guy was a very creative guy who saw creativity as not just being a songwriter, but he saw creativity in every aspect of what he did. His musical hero was Gene Vincent. Gene Vincent had come to the UK as part of the Larry Parnes sort of rock and roll tours along with Eddie Cochran in 1960. Ian Dury would have been 18 at this time, and perhaps he attended some of those gigs and saw Gene Vincent. Although he reports first seeing him in the film The Girl Can't Help It, which came out in 1956, when he would have been, if I can work with that, about 14 years old. Gene Vincent's an interesting character as well. Ian Dury's look was obviously modelled on Gene Vincent, but Gene Vincent also was technically disabled and had to wear a leg brace. And the sort of jerky movements that came from wearing that leg brace became part of his performance style. My father-in-law was also on the tour with Gene Vincent in 1960, a singer called Peter Wynne. And he also described Gene Vincent as being a very prickly character, who was a heavy drinker and prone to outbursts, at one point holding him holding up a knife to him and telling him to shut up. So Gene Vincent and Ian Dury seem to mirror each other in the same way as Elvis Costello, who emerged at the same time, and Buddy Holly seem to echo each other. It's quite interesting how this second generation of British rock and rollers emerge in the 1970s, and those who don't go down the progressive rock route end up pursuing a type of music which is British popular music, British rock and roll, but is also very English in its characteristic. Two other musicians who we could look at for this would be Chaz Hodgetts and Dave Peacock. Dave Peacock was 80 years old a few days ago. Happy birthday, Dave. I really believe that Chaz and Dave were really important musicians, and Chaz and Dave was a very important band in British music history, and I'm going to try and explain why. Their critical claim is nowhere near Ian Dury's, who is seen as a great artist, but in many ways Chaz and Dave and Ian Dury were pursuing the same sort of music, which was rooted fundamentally in American rock and roll, but bringing in musical influences. Chaz and Dave's main influence on their music would have been someone like Jerry Lee Lewis, with that sort of rolling barrel house piano sound, which they made almost like the sound of Cockney London now we associate, even though that comes from American rhythm and blues. Ian Dury's influences were much wider, and I think this is one of the reasons I love him. Of course there's rock and roll in there. Of course there's punk. He had come up at that same time as artists like Alex Harvey, Dr. Feelgood, Wilco Johnson, who eventually, ended up in the Blockheads along with Ian Dury. And that whole sort of pub rock scene when he was playing in, was it Kilburn and the High Roads, informed his whole approach. But with Ian Dury, he seemed to pull in so many different influences into that. There's jazz influences in there. And most importantly to me was funk influences. A lot of Ian Dury's music was really, really funky, like heavily funky. His bass player, Norman Rockwhite, was such an incredible, propulsive bass player that sounded like he belonged in a group like Tower of Power. But Ian Dury was able to subfuse that with a vocal delivery that was wholly British, but fitted in with that groove. It's very interesting to me that this imprints on British indie music. If we think of a band like Blur emerging in the Britpop scene in the 1990s, we can see a great dose of Ian Dury in their music. If we look at a single like Parklife, this is probably indebted to Ian Dury more than anything else. In Parklife, we have this sort of rolling, not funky, but groovy beat at least, which is played out with a sort of football chant vocal. And then Phil Daniels, who is known to most of us in the sort of mod film Quadrophenia that was created by The Who, the quintessential Englishman, sort of wanders around his park imparting wisdom. What's interesting is he is not singing, he's talking, and it sounds really as though it's taken from the blueprints that have been provided by Ian Dury. When would this have been? I would say in the early 2000s perhaps, I was working on the British rap scene. And the British rap scene at that time had taken its lead from the sort of American rap scene, and all the rappers I was working with were influenced by people like Tribe Called Quest and, NWA, Public Enemy. In Birmingham, there was a rap group called The Streets, and they fractured. And the rappers in that group were grabbed by a management company I was working with, and I was placed with them to produce some rap records in the hope of getting a deal. Their original producer had gone in a different route. There's a guy called Mike Skinner who had grown up in Solihull in Birmingham. And he had ended up getting the deal. But the reason why the labels were chasing them is because they had this sound. And I was privy to how that sound came about. The sound was the sound of British rap, which has now gone on to evolve into all sorts of artists, people like Dizzy Rascal, but also drill and a whole host of different rap styles, love them or hate them. But they're rooted in that sort of very funky delivery of the music against a very British delivery. British hip-hop has its roots in Ian Dury. When I was working with these guys, they sat and told me that they were once a normal rap group and sounded like every other rap group, until one day they were sat there and Park Life came on the TV. They looked at each other in disbelief. They went, "This is rap. Blur have invented British rap." Of course they hadn't. It was Ian Dury. They waited around for the next single to come out, which was Girls and Boys, which was sort of an indie parody of house music and that whole sort of British holiday scene. And they decided to base their style on Park Life, but really they were basing their style on Ian Dury. In that respect, Ian Dury's influence across British popular music is absolutely huge. And I just wanted to illustrate that to give you an idea of how important this musician was. And he was important. There was a biopic called Sex and Drugs and Rock and Roll, which was named after the single that came out with his second album, I believe, which was called New Boots and Panties, which I purchased at a very young age. And I was a little disappointed that it didn't have Hit Me With Your Rhythm Stick on, and it didn't have What a Waste, it didn't have Reasons to Be Cheerful. All this stuff wasn't on there, but I still ended up loving it. My version did have Sex and Drugs and Rock and Roll. It was the first track on the album, but I believe that was added on later, so I hadn't got the original vinyl release. In 1981, he brought out a single called Spasticus, Autisticus. And it is that, just put the brightness up a little bit, it's gone very dark here for some reason. It is that single I want to now talk about. Because for me, that more than anything else really personifies the power and energy and joy of Ian Dury's music. Of course, it was banned. I am worried about even using the term Spasticus and having it in the title, but I've decided to do so in honour of Ian Dury. The reason why I decided to do that was doing a little bit of research. I realised Orbital had opened up a recent Paralympics by playing it. And I thought, if the Paralympics can play it as part of their opening ceremony, then I can also mention it. So I have. When he wrote that single, it was off his solo album, which I can't remember the title of. Lord Upminster, is it? Something like that. Interesting lineup on that album, because he got Chaz Jankel, who is the sort of musical guy behind a lot of Ian Dury's songs. He wrote Hit Me With Your Rhythm Stick, What a Waste, Sex and Drugs and Rock and Roll, all written by Chaz Jankel, another person that I cannot mention too much on this video. But he also has on that record, in the rhythm section, it's quite surprising, he's got Sly and Robbie. And when you put the album on, it veers between his normal sort of funky, punky musical delivery, but there's also elements of reggae on here as well, and sort of electronic sounds that we would expect to get as he entered the 1980s. But Spasticus Autisticus is a rally cry. He made this record in the year of the disabled, and it was a protest against that. This is a man that is not going to be held down by his disability. He is going to proclaim it in the same way as the rebel slave Spartacus does. This is a reference to the film Spartacus, starring Kirk Douglas, or at least the story of Spartacus. The most famous scene in that film is, of course, when all these rebels have been caught, and Spartacus, their leader, is hiding within them. And the Romans come and they say they won't kill everybody if Spartacus stands up. So Spartacus, of course, being the noble man that he is, stands up and says, "I am Spartacus." And at that point, someone else stands up and says, "I am Spartacus." And then they all stand up and say, "I am Spartacus." And it is a statement of the fact that we are greater as a whole. It's a statement of unification. And I feel that the name Spasticus Autisticus points to two disabilities that are very interesting. One's physical, and one is much more of a personality disability. And the second half of this video, I want to talk about that, because when that single came out in 1981, we were quite familiar in our school with the term spastic. It was a term of derision. I had gone to school with children with cerebral palsy in the class with us. And it's interesting when I look back, because these kids did get a lot of stick, but also they had a lot of support. And they were seen as part of the gang, like everybody else. And I'm pretty sure our mate that I had in my class when I was growing up as a youngster, a guy called Stephen Young, I remember him to this day, we would have stuck by him whatever, because he was one of our mates. And so hearing that and thinking of Stephen Young, that rally cry reminds me of that. So, yes, the modern world has deemed fit to say we shouldn't say this term and it's disrespectful and it's this and this and that, but it treats people like they're weak and feeble and they can't speak for themselves, they can't stand up for themselves. And I don't say that with any humour. Ian Dury was somebody that did stand up for himself, and he stood up for those people around him that he felt needed standing up, so they would all stand up together and be stronger as a whole. But the term spasticus I understood as a kid. It is now seen as a title of derision. It's on the list of things you're not allowed to say in polite company. The identitarian elites, the metropolitan elites that tell us how we should think and what we should do, will be very upset that I've even used the term, even though on here, this video is coming from a place where I'm entirely trying to champion the creative and emotional wisdom that is within this. My point on this video will be that within this, we have, well, shall I, my point is, because I would rather explore it and open it out than just try and state it up front. Why am I wanting to state it up front? It's because I'm aware of that metropolitan educated elite watching over me and judging. And so I felt the need to say, no, I'm championing these people, and I'm going to say something quite profound about these people. And I felt I needed to say that up front. Well, I just have, haven't I? I'm covering my back all the time. He enjoyed it and cover his back. He didn't care. The single got banned. But I really want to talk about the second word in that, autisticus, which of course refers to autistic. Where the term spastic has been banished from polite company, autistic has become a term which is used all the time for all sorts of different things. Back then it wasn't so much. I didn't even know what the word meant. A few years later, if you'd have asked me when I was perhaps a little bit more educated what autistic meant, I would have said it's someone who is unable to read someone's emotions. That would be it. That it was like a disability where you can't read someone else's emotions, so you don't have that sense of empathy. But of course, with films like Rain Man and that whole thing, this becomes almost like a cultural phenomenon, doesn't it? And I believe that all mental health categories are just clumsy limits, clumsy frames that we just put around people. Oh, you know, you get a rough frame. It's like saying people are surly. And going through, you go, who is he surly? Yeah, that one's surly. I'll put him in the category. What about that one? That's not surly at all. It's just a name. But then our medical profession comes up with all these things that go there and all these causes and whatnot and all that type of stuff. And these terms eventually become negative because in categorizing anybody, in a way, you put these limits around them. Now, when I was working in the education system, I was trained in autism, I was trained in Asperger's, which has suddenly been removed. Now it's all autism. And within my course, which was full of what I saw as very creative young, you know, men and women, we had a lot of so-called autistic kids. And that is why I had to have the training in with these autistic kids. The strange thing was, I really got on with these autistic kids. And when I had the training, a lot of the stuff they said to me that these autistic kids acted like, you know, responded to the way they would think and feel, I thought, well, that's just quite natural and normal. And I also found that many of these kids, when they were having trouble with their autism, would call for me. Now, I wasn't the most empathetic of the lecturers. Not at all. I was the lecturer that stood up in front of the class and was very effusive and was able to sort of entertain everybody as a whole with my, you know, explorations into different music forms, something that I have transferred onto here. But I wasn't the empathetic one, but I was empathetic to the autistic kids. I liked them, and I saw in them huge talent. Because what is talent? Talent is when you're motivated by the aesthetic. We're talking about creative talent. You're motivated by the aesthetic more than normal people. And then you pursue that with a motivation. If motivation is not strong enough, you pursue it with every fibre of your being and you will not let go. Right? I was like that as a kid learning the drums. I was like that as a kid studying music. And I would see these kids in my class were getting frustrated because that is how they were approaching music. And they expected everybody around them to have the same level of input. And when they didn't, they then would challenge them. And often their belief in what they were creatively trying to achieve was stronger than shallower, pointless social norms where you might be polite to someone or you might not say something to someone because of their feelings. I too have that in me in bucket loads, and I think people enjoy my videos here because I'm able to come on and I will just say things and they think, well, no, and no one else will say that. It's true, you know, but I can't believe Andy said it. And the reason I do that is because I have a very strong, I'm not stupid, I know it's going to upset people. In fact, I'm very clever at upsetting people. I know exactly how to put the needle in to upset people. I know exactly where to prod. We have a progressive rock audience in front of us, and they think they have great taste in music. And some of them might be a bit perturbed that I'm championing Ian Dury here, the progressive rock fans. They might not think he's proggy enough. But I know where their Achilles heel is. It's Dave Gilmour. And I press it and press it and press it, and they can't understand why. And part of the reasons why they can't understand and be able to read why I'm doing it, some of them, is because they may well be on the spectrum, as normal people say. Because I believe the liking of progressive rock, a part of the aspect of it, is to be on this spectrum. And I place myself in that. I'm aware of these things. I have been called autistic more times than I care to mention. I've never been diagnosed for it. I don't know whether I am or not. But on this video, I'm talking about when I talk about the genius of Ian Dury, what I'm really talking about is his ability to pull in all these different music forms, all these different references, weave them together in a way which is him entirely, and to be able to create a song which is so truthful, so kind, so funny, and yet so bombastic in its ability to pull down the polite society in which we find ourselves, the establishment. And in that respect, he is pure rock and roll. He is pure rock and roll. He is challenging the establishment. And I think that if you have what some people call autism, and I think that that label, right, I don't think every autistic person is creative. But I see a link. I saw it, and I'm not a psychologist, and I don't understand the link. And I'm not here to discuss that. I'm here to say the fact that there's something incredibly positive in many people that have been labelled autistic, and is their ability to create compelling stuff for the rest of society and challenge the status quo, because their need to explore the aesthetic and their need to make either the ethical, moral, or even political statements is more important than their worry about being polite and not offending the metropolitan educated elite, who have swapped their allegiances from, virtue signaling their class to each other. They now virtue signal their, what would be the word, their virtue, I suppose. And that is what we have. And there's words they don't like. So it's very odd here that Ian Dury, and I think this is genius, you see, and I think Ian Dury is half aware of this, but he's also half not aware of this. This is what's really interesting, right? There's two things going on here. There's always two things going on in the arts. And the fact that the word spastic has been erased by the establishment, but autistic has been uplifted. An autistic diagnosis now means in the education system for a young person, they will get all sorts of perks, they will get all sorts of things to help them along. But it's that Ian Dury was challenging, and it's that I'm highlighting on this video. I'm highlighting it here. This is a difficult video for me to do. Right, I haven't just come on here to talk about Ian Dury. You can probably see that when I first started, I was quite stilted because I felt that there was a need to deliver in the first 15 minutes or so a description of Ian Dury for those people who like Ian Dury and they go, yeah, Andy likes Ian Dury. That's great. He's telling me about Ian Dury. I know all this, but it's great to listen to him talk about it because now I know he likes it. That's a great thing. That's what some people expect. And then other people might go, oh, I like what Andy talks about. So if he's talking about this artist, I want to know about them. And I've tried to do that. But really, I'm really talking about the genius of that song because it's been in my head. And I'm going to tell you why it's been in my head. It's because of events that happened over the weekend. I had to do a gig over at Jellyman's this weekend. And it was a difficult gig to do. We weren't walking into a venue. We were having to have the PA, the video wall, the lights, chairs, food, drink, everything brought in. We were having to make sure that we were fulfilling health and safety, making sure that the venue was protected, And in the chaos that ensued, that was quite difficult to do. Because of various things which I believe were a culmination of all sorts of little issues. In other words, it was nobody's real fault that this had happened, but I think that we had to move rooms, and we couldn't use the big room downstairs. We had to move up to my smaller studio upstairs. Getting gear upstairs was harder, trying to get audience in was harder, trying to get the seats in so they could sit was harder, and the expectations of the gig to the artists that were turning up had been changed, and they never liked that. And because they didn't like this to some extent, I think that created even more chaos on the day. I dealt with a lot of chaos on that day. I got through it, we did the gig, people loved the gig, they went home happy, but it did not, it did create certain tensions which have affected me over the weekend deeply. They've deeply affected me. Now, if I was to justify myself doing it, because I've wondered whether I should have done it, and is it just easier to just get up in the morning and just make videos? And right, I'm going to tell you a few things that happen on my channel. Sometimes I'm very funny and I'm joking, sometimes quite serious, sometimes we get into real history, and sometimes it gets dark. This might be a little bit too dark. I'm not in my studio. I'm at home. I'm having a big think about stuff. And the thing that I keep thinking about is that song by Dury. I'm thinking about what a prickly character he was, what a genius that guy was. And why am I thinking about that? Well, there's this guy that is also at the Jellyman's where I work. He's a photographer. And he's only a young guy. And he was just walking out. And I said, there isn't a chance you could grab some gear. As soon as he picked that gear up, he was completely focused on what we were doing. His knowledge of PAs, of video, of setting up sound, music, the whole lot, photography, the whole lot was only a young guy, but he had a great knowledge, he had a great energy, and he suddenly threw himself into this role of helping us, right? Now, if he had been there with the chaos that was going on, this was the X factor, this was the thing that was delivered by fate to me, this is the saviour. This is the guy that stepped in, and that was just an extra pair of hands and an extra pair of energy, because throughout that day there was times when I was flagging. I wasn't being able to keep up with everything that was going on. With all the chaos that was ensuing around me, I wasn't able to keep up with it. But he stepped up to the mark and he helped. And so often I found myself going up and saying, I couldn't get that for us. Can you get this? That is, can you sort? And he was going like the clappers. The next day he told me when he woke up, he was almost like bedridden because he had thrown himself into this. Me being an older man and him being a younger guy, I sort of took him under my wing. So I started to give him some advice. I can't help this. I've been a lecturer for over 30 years. And he started to listen to the advice, which is very interesting because most people don't. And that frustrates me. I try and pass on what I know about, the music industry, about the media industry, about how to market yourself, how things like Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, how to basically get some sort of purchase in this modern world. And most people, they're like, well, who the hell are you? I'm not going to listen to you. Why should I listen to you? And I'm thinking, well, you don't. Okay, then, fine. But this guy did listen. And I think we got somewhere. I think his frustration at the world around him, which has been manifested in his case in a diagnosis of autism. And I found myself at the end of the day saying, the problem you're going to have is you've got all this energy and drive and you want to do this so much that it's life and death. It's not a choice, it's not a hobby, it's life and death for you. You've got to do it. And yet at your age, you have no social purchase whatsoever, like me, right, who has really fought against this for 40 odd years and then has now been able to build things around me so I can get up and be creative. And people might scratch their beard and say, how does Andy produce all these videos? How can he get all this stuff done? Where's it all coming from? It's like a Niagara Falls. And the thing that's interesting me is, yet again, this guy I've got along with so well that I sometimes wonder if the fundamental aspect of creativity is actually an imbalance in the creator, an imbalance that has to be filled by action. And perhaps the title Autism is something which doesn't really fully describe this. I wish I was an expert on this, but sometimes when I've spoken to experts, they're the ones who have no understanding of creativity whatsoever. And they don't understand that this idea of helping people doesn't work for creative people. Because creative people see the world from an individual point of view. They're in a way self-centered. That proclamation of Spasticus Autisticus, I am Spartacus, we're greater than the whole, also has an inverse dialectic to it, in that Spartacus had something about him which was unlike everybody else. In that respect, he was an outsider. But when the time was right, his outsideriness, which made him seem prickly and difficult to the world around him. I mean, when you watch the film, it is precisely that sets off the plot as he hamstrings a Roman guard by biting them in their Achilles heel because of his sense of justice. And everything that then pursues is because of that prickliness. A prickliness that I see in Ian Dury, and which is the genius and the thing we enjoy. A prickliness that I could see in my young friend that was helping me out over the weekend, who also seemed to be causing chaos for the people around him by being so focused that he made a few errors. He made a few errors that the normies don't like. I made a few errors that the normies don't like. I went home wondering, what is it about me? Why do I do stuff like this? It's always been like this. Why am I getting in trouble for this? I've felt my whole life like I'm in trouble. And I'm putting it out there because I know there's a lot of music fans who watch this, but there's also a lot of creatives. And this video is open-ended. As I get to the end of it, and I do feel like I've nailed what I wanted to say on this video. And this is all very open because I believe that there is a black space in this autism diagnosis where creativity resides. And I don't think anybody has even been able to get anywhere near tackling that, except for perhaps Ian Dury on that record. There's a black space in there. I don't think the psychologists understand creativity enough to be able to see the pragmatic and utilitarian aspects of personality which are required by the functioning whole for the I am Spartacus whole to operate. There has to be imbalance in the system. It's yin and yang. There has to be. And some people suffer because of that, but they're essential. And yes, they need to be cut some slack, but also by the same token, you have to be aware but that their approach will be to go their own way. And they will go their own way with force. I know I haven't got to the back of this. There is so much stuff on here where I have talked about people who have anxiety and depression. I have related it quite safely to creative activity. And I think I've done something here which I don't know whether other people have done. It seems to help to a lot of people the way I've explained that on a number of videos. This autism one I've avoided. I've avoided it because of the identity brigade, because of the metropolitan elites, because of the very term itself. You feel as soon as you say autistic, it's an accusation almost. I remember teaching, and kids would go to the doctors. The doctor would say, "Look, I think I think your child's autistic. Now, we can do the tests, but I suggest you don't, because it will do them no good whatsoever. They're much better to not have that diagnosis go through the education system. I heard that. I don't know what the answers are. This is a contentious video. Ian Dury was a contentious man. His legacy lives on in this video, and I am expressing, because when I woke up this morning, right, I didn't want to go to my studio. I wanted to stay here. I didn't want to go outside. I felt quite panicky. I had pondered a lot, but the thing that I really got out of it, out of that weekend and that concert, wasn't playing in Upminster, which was incredible. It wasn't doing the gig with Tim Bonus. It wasn't seeing all the people. I mean, a lot of the people that come down and watch this channel, the patrons and stuff, they might have noticed I was a little bit, I wasn't as friendly as I normally would be. I did it when I stood up in front of everybody, but in myself, I just wanted to disappear. This is what you're seeing. This is why the video's so dark. I've only just realised this now, is that as soon as this appears with me, the exposure goes down. Shall we bang it up at the end just to show that things are a little bit better? Oh, see, I can't live with that. Is that okay? All of you who sat through this going, oh, this interesting video Andy's done, but it's too dark. Does he realise it's too dark? It's too dark. You should have done it again, but it's too dark. It's too dark, you know. I don't know if I can watch this. It's too dark. And especially those who are on the spectrum, they're going, oh, I don't like this. It's too dark. Andy's left, it's too dark. Well, it's not dark now, is it? It's nice now. It's all nice at the end. It's all nicey, nicey, nice, nice, nice. It's all nicey, nice, isn't it? But I didn't know that. I didn't know that I'd done it too dark until I'm all the way through. I've been worrying in the same way, but I've pumped it up now, haven't I? We're in the light now. And maybe that has some sort of metaphorical reason. I don't know. Do you know? I don't know. But I had to do this video today. I've sat on my bed thinking, how can I do a video for the main channel so I could unblock this, so I can get back to making videos and doing what I do? And this is my solution to it, was to take the what has perturbed me head on, to take this head on and to try and deal with it. And I knew it would be confused. I knew it would not be one of my best videos, but maybe it is, I don't know. Now, some of you might be thinking, Andy's, you know, maybe after saying all this, he's going to put his foot in his mouth again because, you know, maybe he hasn't got the story straight. Maybe things went on at the weekend, which there's a different point of view, and he hasn't put that forth. And I have said this at the end to acknowledge that. I may be blind to certain things that I'm doing. I have the horrific feeling that that is the case. I was so shocked by the events of the weekend that maybe I'm going too close to the actual things, and I don't want to. I'm trying to deal with me. I'm trying to deal with something that's happened all my life. I'm trying to deal with all the people I've upset, all the people who have misunderstood what I meant, which is my fault, all the miscommunications, all the slapdashness, all the you know, things I've lost, things I didn't think about. You know, I've gone through life like that. I'm 57 years old, and I am still like that. And it is not out of can't be arsed, or I'm laid back. It's nothing to do with being laid back. It's the fact, it's the opposite. I am focused immensely on my creative pursuit. And in pursuing that, sometimes, especially when the pressure arises, my focus is not where a normal person's focus would be. And all I can say is I was so grateful that there was someone else like that, and that we were able to bond over being like that over those those days. So that's really what I wanted to come on and say, is that that really was why it was worthwhile. And I hope that that guy that stepped up, he got something back. And what I hope he got back was a little bit of wisdom of how to deal with his own demons, and a little bit of insight of how he can take that engine that's inside him, which is so destructive, and hopefully, you know, manage to tether it and for it to go off in the direction he wants it to go in. And you know how you do that? It's by really examining deeply what you are trying to achieve. And sometimes that group that can stand up and say, I'm Spartacus, I'm Spartacus, that group that all stands is stronger as a whole. They're only strong as a whole if they have a goal. I'm afraid that goal will always come from the driven, charismatic outsider that sees the injustice, or sees the different way of doing things, or sees the different aesthetic climate which is required for our species to go forth. And then we'll grab that and we'll pursue that beyond even life and death. That pursuit will be of so much importance that in some cases the people that would turn around and want to stay away from that person will not understand the way they act. Sometimes they'll get behind them. Now, I want to show I'm knowing enough as well on this video to tell you I know what the pushback of this is. That it will be. It will be people will say, Andy's trying to play the artist card. It's like playing the race card, but for creative people. You're a creative person. No one understands you. You're special. You see the world in a different way, so you expect people to just let you off and walk around you because you're special, and you're not special. You're just like anybody else, and you have to obey the rules. No, I don't. And yes, it is the case that if you're a creative person, you're cursed, but you are someone who sees the world in a different way. That's the whole point. And when you say that, if you listen to that retort, it is totally basically saying conform to the establishment, conform to the establishment, comply to the greater good, comply to the community, comply. And the artist does, I go, no, I'm not going to comply. I'm not going to comply. You'll comply. You'll do what needs to be done. No, I won't. That fundamentally is the tussle that's going on. In that, if you stand outside it and you're objective enough to be not in one camp or the other, you realise that both of those things are essential, and they both have to go on, and they both have to be respected from both sides. And there's a middle ground that we try and attend to. And if we can do that, then there will be some positivity. But you will not get that if your position is so dogmatic and ideological, and that your belief that the communitarian spirit and the establishment is so important that must be obeyed above absolutely everything else, including the creative pursuit you are trying to achieve. Then that will only cause a rift in society that will be so hard to heal, and the fallout will be not positive for anybody on any side. If you like this video, put a like on it. If you want to see more stuff like this, subscribe. If you want to help me financially, you can go over to my PayPal tip jar link down below and become and drop us a little bit of a tip in there. You can also become a member. I've got a Substack, I've got a Bandcamp where you can become a subscriber for my music. There's a whole host of stuff out there because I've been such a busy bee, haven't I? Thanks for watching. See you on the next one.